The voice you hear singing "I Could Have Danced All Night in My Fair Lady" is not Audrey Hepburn's. Hepburn prepared for months. She trained, she recorded, and when the film was finished and released in 1964, every note in every song, with barely a fragment of exception, belonged to a woman whose name appeared nowhere in the credits. The studio had warned her that if she ever told anyone what she had done, they would, in her own words, run her out of town. The film won 8 Academy Awards. Hepburn was not nominated. The woman who sang every song she mimed was not thanked. And the voice you have heard every time you have ever watched that film, a voice that helped build one of Hollywood's most beloved performances, was kept a secret for years. Number 1, the most expensive bet in Broadway history. Before the film, there was the stage show. My Fair Lady opened on Broadway in 1956. Based on George Bernard Shaw's 1913 play Pygmalion, the story of a phonetics professor who bets a colleague he can transform a Cockney flower seller into a convincing aristocrat, the Broadway production ran for 2,717 performances, making it the longest-running major musical in Broadway history at that time. Julie Andrews played Eliza Doolittle. Rex Harrison played Henry Higgins. The show made both of them stars. In 1962, Warner Brothers purchased the film rights for $5.5 million, a record price for any stage property at that point. Jack Warner, head of the studio, took personal control of the production. The budget was set at $17 million. With that much money at stake, Warner made a decision that would define everything that followed. He would not be casting Julie Andrews. Number 2, the woman they didn't want. Julie Andrews had played Eliza Doolittle on Broadway for the entire original run, thousands of performances, a Tony nomination, and reviews that described the role as definitively hers. When the film adaptation was announced, most of the industry assumed she would carry it to the screen. Jack Warner disagreed. Andrews had never made a film. She was a stage star, not a movie star, and Warner was spending $17 million. He needed, as lyricist Alan J. Lerner later told Andrews directly, a name. Audrey Hepburn, who had won an Oscar for Roman Holiday in 1953 and followed it with a series of major box office successes, was his answer. Warner signed her for $1 million, her largest fee to that point. Andrews, told politely that she had not been considered, accepted the rejection. I felt sad," she said later, "that I would never have the chance to put my version of Eliza on film." Walt Disney, however, was not bothered by her lack of film experience. He offered her Mary Poppins instead. Number 3, the voice she trained for. Audrey Hepburn knew the role required singing. She prepared seriously. She underwent extensive vocal training, working with a coach for months before filming began. She recorded all of her own vocals during production, every song, take after take. Marni Nixon, a classically trained soprano who had already ghosted for Deborah Kerr in The King and I in 1956, and for Natalie Wood in West Side Story in 1961, was brought in quietly. The original plan, according to Nixon's own account, was to create composite tracks, blends of her voice and Hepburn's, preserving as much of Hepburn's performance as possible. Hepburn believed this was how the final film would sound. She continued to record. She was told to keep trying. Nixon herself later said the producers never had any serious intention of using Hepburn's voice as the primary track. The decision had been made long before Hepburn stopped recording. Number 4, the ghostess with the mostest. Marni Nixon had been doing this work since the early 1950s. She had dubbed Deborah Kerr's singing in The King and I. She had dubbed Natalie Wood's singing in West Side Story, though Wood, like Hepburn, had been led to believe she would be kept in the mix. By the time Nixon arrived on My Fair Lady, she was the industry's most accomplished invisible voice, though Time magazine would eventually dub her the ghostess with the mostest. For My Fair Lady, Nixon and Hepburn shared a limousine to the studio on working days. They recorded side by side. Nixon described the challenge of matching Hepburn's voice as the most difficult of her career. Hepburn's diction, her Cockney accent work, her acting choices in each song, all had to be absorbed and mirrored. In the final film, every song was sung by Nixon. Hepburn's own voice appears only in fragments in the angry spoken-style passages of Just You Wait, where the melody sits low and the notes are within her range. The moment the song rises into its soprano passages, Nixon takes over. Neither woman's name appeared on the soundtrack album. Nixon received no royalty. She was warned, in terms she later quoted directly. If she told anyone what she had done, they would run her out of town. Number 5. What Rex Harrison did differently. While Hepburn's voice was being replaced, Rex Harrison was doing something no one else in the film could do. He was singing live. Harrison could not or would not mime. He insisted that every one of his musical numbers be performed and recorded in real time on set, with the orchestra playing live in his earpiece. To make this possible, he wore what is believed to be one of the first wireless lavalier microphones ever used in a musical film, hidden in the knot of his necktie. He performed "I've Grown Accustomed to Her Face" and "A Little Bit of Luck" and every other number exactly as you hear them live, single take, in costume, on the set. Hepburn was recording in a studio. Harrison was performing in a room. The same film, shot in the same year, with two entirely opposite approaches to the question of whether what audiences would hear was real. Number 6. The secret that wasn't. The studio guarded the dubbing carefully. Nixon was under strict instruction not to speak about it. But by 1964, the practice of ghost singing in Hollywood musicals was already an open secret among industry insiders. Nixon herself was known in the trade, and her work on West Side Story had already circulated quietly. The broader public did not know. But Hollywood did. When My Fair Lady was released in October 1964, it was the most anticipated film of the year. It had cost more than almost anything Warner Brothers had ever made. It received 12 Academy Award nominations. And the question of whether the woman whose face was on every poster could actually sing the songs, a question the studio had gone to considerable lengths to avoid, was already being whispered. Number 7. The Oscar that went the other way. On April the 5th, 1965, My Fair Lady won 8 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, Best Director for George Cukor, and Best Actor for Rex Harrison. Audrey Hepburn was not nominated for Best Actress. Her absence from the nominations has been discussed and debated for 60 years. The Academy's voting is secret, so no cause can be proven. What is known is this: Hepburn was not nominated despite starring in the year's Best Picture winner. It was widely felt at the time that the backlash over Julie Andrews being passed over, combined with the revelation that Hepburn had not sung her own songs, had cost her the nomination. Julie Andrews, in her first film, won Best Actress for Mary Poppins. In her Golden Globe acceptance speech, where she had defeated Hepburn in the same category weeks earlier, Andrews thanked the man who made all this possible, Mr. Jack L. Warner. The line received knowing laughter. Andrews herself later said she believed Hepburn should have been nominated. "I'm very sorry she wasn't," she said. Number 8. Nixon Speaks. For years, Marni Nixon stayed quiet. The warning she had received that speaking would end her career was not an idle threat in an industry where studios controlled almost everything. But the secret could not hold indefinitely. Nixon eventually did speak, first in interviews and then in a memoir titled "I Could Have Sung All Night," published in 2006. She described the recording sessions, the challenge of matching Hepburn's voice, the limousine rides to the studio, the loop recording process used to align her singing with the filmed close-ups of Hepburn's lips. She also described the moment she realized how completely her work had been absorbed into the performance the world was watching. On several songs, she said, "I recorded complete tracks. On others, I supplemented Audrey's tracks with my higher notes. The final version," she confirmed, contained almost no Hepburn. She received no screen credit. She received no royalty from the film's original release or soundtrack album. Years later, after legal efforts, she received some payment from the album. The film's official credits, as they appear to this day, lists no vocalist for Eliza Doolittle. Number 9. What Hepburn recorded. Audrey Hepburn's own recordings of the My Fair Lady songs have survived. They were not destroyed. For decades, they sat in the Warner Brothers archive, unheard by the public. In 2012, a restoration team preparing a 50th anniversary edition of the film discovered the original recordings were in better condition than expected. Some of Hepburn's vocal tracks were included as bonus material on the anniversary release, the first time most audiences had heard what she actually sounded like singing the role she had spent months preparing. Listening to those recordings, the decision is easier to understand. Hepburn's voice is present, and her acting instincts are evident in every phrase. But the soprano passages, the high-soaring lines of "I could have danced all night" and "Wouldn't it be lovely" require a range she did not have. Nixon's voice is simply different in kind, not just degree. Hepburn knew this. Nixon quoted her directly. She was very smart and could say, "I know this is not good enough. I want to keep trying myself." But she had to accept that it wasn't quite what it should be. Number 10. The missing credit. My Fair Lady has been on television, released on video, on DVD, on Blu-ray, and on streaming for 60 years. It is one of the most watched musicals ever made. The restoration of 1994, supervised by James Katz, returned the film to something close to its original color and clarity. The end credits of every version of My Fair Lady list the cast, the crew, the musicians, the costume designers, and the choreographers. Marni Nixon's name does not appear among them. The voice singing every song that Audrey Hepburn's face performs, the voice audiences have heard and loved for 60 years, the voice that helped the film win Best Picture, the voice that may have cost Hepburn her nomination has no credit in the film to this day. Nixon died in 2016 at the age of 86. She had spent the final decades of her life speaking openly about the work she had done, the way it had been handled, and what she believed ghost singers deserved. The film she helped make is remembered as a classic. Her name is not on it.